It has nothing to do with me being cocky or overly confident. It's just a matter of wanting this to happen. Life is too short and you have to take risks.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Live Through That. I'm your host, Mike Hipple, and on this podcast, we'll dig a little deeper into a pivotal moment into the lives of some of my favorite artists from the 80s and 90s. This week, we're talking with Joseph Burcaw, the bassist for Black 47. He has a new band, Bearclaw the Balance Brigade, and has just released a new EP, Four on the Floor, featuring living color vocalist Corey Glover. Today, he reads us a passage from his as-yet unfinished memoir. It's all about manifestation and the power of intention.
We turned off Estero Drive, approaching Causeway Street, and then it happened. My body began to quiver as the mighty Boston Garden 2.0 began to come into full focus. My friends pulled up to the front entrance and dropped me off, wishing me the best of luck as they drove off into a sea of gridlock traffic. I grabbed my gig bag, threw it over my shoulder, and looked up in amazement at the marquee. Tonight, the Dropkick Murphys with special guest Black 47. Even though we would be opening for the Dropkicks, a position we found ourselves in many times during my tenure in the band, I marveled at this performance because the Garden was on my bucket list of venues to perform in before my time as an active touring musician was up. Most people might prefer Madison Square Garden or the Grand Ole Opry on their bucket list to perform in, but not this guy. Boston has always been my home away from home. It's a place where I can let my guard down and breathe normally, without the stressors of noise pollution and claustrophobia. I first saw Black 47 live in 1995 at TT the Bear's Place in Central Square in Cambridge. I was floored by their take no prisoners punk rock attitude, reminiscent of The Clash, fused with the songwriting sophistication of Bruce Springsteen. A perfect blend that hooked me from the first downbeat. Now, in spring of 2013, I was finally graduating from fan to the bandstand. And boy, was there excitement in the air. 10 years earlier, it's early morning, the air is crisp on this particular fall day in Brooklyn. I was standing at the F train Smith and Ninth Stop platform, staring across the East River overlooking lower Manhattan, thinking to myself, what's going to be my next move? At this time, I had been living in the city for a few years, pounding the pavement, trying to get my name out to the masses as a bass player, and exploring the idea of what it would be like venturing out on my own without the burden of carrying a band on my shoulders. Being a band member requires a hell of a lot of compromising that at times can hinder a person's decision-making process if you're not carefully aware, which I was most definitely not. From my standpoint, a band signifies the all for one and one for all mentality, powering through the trenches as a single unit for the cause, which in those days was for a record deal. I'd experienced a recent letdown not too long before New York, fighting the good fight, living and performing in East London by way of Boston with my former band, Asia Tech. We flew into Heathrow Airport all together with a piss and vinegar attitude, ready to take on the world. 6 months later, we flew back to the States with our tails between our legs, all on separate flights, I might add. We were schoolmates playing together off and on for just under 15 years total, which is a long time in the grand scheme of things, so this amicable yet painful breakup, speaking for myself, was like experiencing a divorce from your spouse of many years. I wasn't used to all of this newfound freedom and independence, but I had to admit, it eventually felt great emancipating myself from my former bandmates. New York City has this infectious persona where people ebb and flow, like the tides crashing and retracting in their cyclical patterns. You tend to find yourself coasting along at an abnormal pace just to keep up with everyone else positioned on either side of you, everyone encroaching on your personal space. One must remember, the island of Manhattan houses millions of people on a rather minuscule plot of land, and the idea of getting away for some respite means going to the park, or in my case, going to the park first, and then to the local Barnes & Noble to wind down and to gain a little peace of mind. I returned home after a long shift of folding sweaters, a la Banana Republic, elbowing strangers on public transportation, cursing out a stray rat or two, the size of a small lapdog. They were scurrying out of a trash-filled alleyway heading in my direction. Ah, yes, living the dream. I often yearned for a bit of soul calming, and Prospect Park was my sanctuary to escape from the constant bleakness of continuous failed music connections, failed romantic relationships, and overall failure to make a dent in the world I wasn't quite yet permitted to enter. That would soon change as my music career with the band Black 47 was waiting patiently for me just around the corner. My life overall just seemed to be slipping through my fingers as the weight of a ball and chain shackled to my ankles sent me into a downward spiral. Fading into the abyss of mediocrity was beginning to feel all too real, and something needed to happen now. Time was ticking, and my sense of urgency was creeping up from the rear, creating moments of anxiety on a much grander scale than usual. I arrived in New York City 2 months after 9/11, and let me tell you, the world had changed forever in every conceivable way imaginable. It was overwhelming witnessing the amount of silence on my subway commutes to and from the dreaded retail day gig. Folks were generally kind, compassionate, and polite to each other, which is not the Big Apple I was familiar with. I had given myself a 5-year goal that within this time frame, I would get hired by a well-known and established professional touring band, making my living through my number one love in the universe, the music. Or I could resort to plan B, which didn't even exist. Little did I know that that goal would be achieved 5 years to the day of conceiving it. I never worked harder networking, handing out business cards at music seminars, clubs, private parties, or even to complete strangers on the 14th Street crosstown bus. Within a few years of my arrival, I had accumulated some modest success, which really meant getting paid on a more consistent basis for my time and services as a sideman musician. Yes, it was peanuts, but at least some extra chump change was beginning to funnel through my otherwise empty pockets. Here is where the power of intention comes to mind. What you put out to the universe truly does come back in the form of golden opportunities, chance encounters, or even financial prosperity. It can also bring adverse effects too if the intention or thought produced isn't something that is beneficial to one's higher self. Think about those friends, family members, or acquaintances who always run into bad luck by not allowing themselves to get out of their own way. The Charlie Browns of the world need to take some advice from the playbook of mystic guru Neville Goddard. His teachings unequivocally worked wonders and have worked wonders in my personal life over the years. I was practicing his methodology without even realizing it. I cannot stress enough the importance of staying the course and staying true to oneself as an artist, keeping the faith during those difficult times of rejection, disappointment, and utter fatigue. Listen to no one but your inner baby soul. Thank you, Neil Peart. And work your tail off during the process. Put into practice visualizing where you wish to be and make it habitual. Mark my word, you will succeed and manifest what the little baby soul of yours desires. It may not present itself in a conventional way and may take some time for it to come to fruition. But be patient, as difficult as that may seem in the moment when things aren't going according to plan. This musical journey has led me down a path where sacrifice and tenacity have collided in a complete and harmonious way. Music chose me. I did not choose music. There was nothing and no one who was going to prevent me from pursuing my passion. Over time, I was able to create an iron cast coat of skin, allowing me to take rejection after rejection with a grain of salt, moving right along to the next audition or open jam session with my dignity still intact. Let me stress, I have sacrificed almost everything to get where I am now as a middle-aged guy, and surrendering by letting go of control is the key to that success. A woman by the name of Stephanie Germanata used to perform on the same West Village, Lower East Side singer-songwriter circuit I was involved with, and I would see her often doing her thing down at the clubs. She always struck me as an individual with that superstar quality as she banged away on her electric keyboard at the bitter end on Bleecker Street. That talented starlet would change the course of top 40 pop music during the early 2000s, and her name would later become Lady Gaga. Even though she and I come from totally different musical backgrounds, we're both cut from the same cloth and have carried out our duties as writers, performers, teachers, and healers who practice what we preach, and who remain loyal to our art and to the act of healing through creative expression. I will close out by recounting a conversation I had with a college friend who I reconnected with 20 plus years later. He said, Joe, do you remember telling me at our Spring Battle of the Bands event that I should be on the lookout for you because someday you will be on national television performing your music? At that moment, I truly didn't remember saying that to him, and I was outright embarrassed by my cockiness and overly inflated 20-year-old ego. However, with some hindsight and a little bit of reflection, I do indeed remember making that brash comment to him all those years ago. In all honesty, on a subconscious level, I knew that this was going to become a reality, and it was achieved multiple times over, way beyond my expectations. You will be tested time after time, and many tears will be shed during the process of pursuing music professionally. But whatever you do, do not give up on yourself. I wouldn't change a single action I have made on this journey of getting to a point of life of eternal satisfaction and supreme contentment. Words I stand by from the inner core of my existence.
That was the beginning of Joe's memoir, tentatively titled From Fan to Bandstand. The manuscript, which he's writing by hand, isn't completed yet, but he hopes to have it done in the coming year or so. All of this hard work paid off with an opportunity to audition for the band Black 47 to be their touring bassist. How did that come to pass?
So Black 47 were on my radar back in the early 90s. I used to watch 120 minutes every whatever it was every day. I don't know when it was broadcast, but it was quite often. And they would always push these up and coming alternative bands and college bands. And I remember seeing, I think it was the video for 40 Shades of Blue. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, this is interesting. So you have Ilian Irish pipes mixed in with tin whistle, saxophone, trombone, quirky vocals, and a huge backbeat, which was Hammy, the drummer from the band. So it automatically just stuck in my brains. Wow, these guys are interesting. I like this sound. And then Funky Kaylee, which was the hit, was getting a lot of rotation as well. And I liked the song, I did, but it was 40 Shades of Blue that really got my attention. So they were always on my radar. And throughout the 90s, I was hearing about, they were really making a dent in the music scene. And they used to play in Boston quite a bit. I went to school in Newport, Rhode Island, which is a hop, skip, and a jump away from Boston, and used to see a lot of shows at TT the Bears place, and happened to see them. And my goodness, from the start of the first downbeat, it was just this wall of sound. This wall, it's like they commanded you to pay attention and to listen. And they had this punk rock ethos that I loved. It's like the Clash, but with the sophistication of Bruce Springsteen. And man, loved it, and was just following them throughout the years after that about their trajectory and how well they were doing. So fast forward to the early 2000s, I moved to New York City, and with the hope of trying to get into a major band and to be able to make my living as a full-time musician. Unfortunately, as many of us, a lot of people don't want to admit it, but we had to have a day job, and I was working in retail for a few years, just pounding the pavement and going out at night trying to meet all these different people and handing out my card. I mean, I would stay out until 4 a.m., have to be at work at 7 a.m., getting maybe 1 hour sleep, or sometimes just hanging out downtown, because I used to work down on Broadway in Soho, down in that area. I would just walk around and just wait till my shift had to start and go right in. I don't know how I did that, but to be young. So I had to make that sacrifice. But because of that, I was able to meet so many different singer-songwriters. That was kind of my shtick in my scene. I'd play with a lot of people that were kind of that singer-songwriter genre. But at one point, I was performing with about 3 or 4 different bands and was getting my name out there. And I was making some money, and not a lot, but making some money for my services. And this is the day, too, when Craigslist was very popular, and that's where a lot of people were, and the Village Voice, people were advertising for musicians, and that was kind of the go-to zine. And online, Craigslist, everybody would go there to check on people who were looking for bass players or whatnot, or singers or keyboardists. So I remember it was 2000, summer of 2006, I believe. And I saw this one advert. Now, mind you, I was answering everything. I wasn't really keeping track. There were so many different adverts that I was answering and not really following up with, just putting my name out there, who I was, and sending out EPKs, electronic press kits, by the way, kids. And this one, it was Black 47, but they didn't mention who they were in the advertisement. It just said professional touring band looking for bass player ASAP for touring and recording. So I sent to the email. I sent my bio and EPK, and about a week later, I got and my phone number was I included my phone number, and I got a phone call, and it was Hammy, the drummer from Black 47, but he was using a pseudonym, and I can't remember what the name was, but it was hysterical. But he would just said, "Hey Joe, this is so and so. Wanted to talk to you if I could." So he gave me his number. Called him back, maybe the following morning, and we were talking, and I guess he liked my vibe, but he had said to me, "Hey, listen, did you ever hear of the band Black 47?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "Well, I'm the drummer." So I take the phone away from my mouth, and my mouth's dropping. Go, "What?" He said, "Yeah. So listen, I'd like to see you perform live. I like what I heard on your CDs, but I want to hear more." So as luck would have it, I was playing at the Cutting Room. I believe it was the following weekend. I believe we spoke on a Monday, and I believe it was that upcoming Saturday. I had a gig with a band. So we made arrangements for Hammy to come out and to see me and to check me out, see what I'm all about. Who's this Joe Burcaw guy? So the gig comes. It's an awful night. It's torrential downpour. I believe it was July. I think it was July of 2006. There's maybe 10 people in the audience, and great gig. Thought it went well, but no Hammy. So I got off stage. I was a little bummed out, but it's fine. So I just figured, okay, we'll move on. Let's just keep staying the course. I get home, and this is before I had a cell phone, and I got a message on my voicemail from Hammy saying that he did make it to the gig, loved what he saw, apologized because he was soaked to the bone from the torrential downpour. He was able to watch maybe 4 songs, and then he had to just get home because he was just sopping wet. But he invited me to come down for an audition with the band. Now, I had to wait about a month because the guys were out on the road touring around the country, or maybe Europe. I can't quite remember. But he gave me a list of tunes for me to go over and to memorize for the audition. And with me, I take everything seriously. So it was a type of situation where I called out of work for a couple of days, and I shedded for about 8 to 12 hours a day. I am not joking, in my bedroom, just so I could master these songs and come in and nail them. Now, again, I was young, but I wasn't that young. I was probably 30 at that point. I can't quite remember. So time was ticking, and there was a sense of urgency. I'm not screwing this up. I am getting this gig. I put it out there to the universe. I'm getting this. I'm getting this. This is going to happen. Just prepare. And I did. So the day of the audition comes up. I got there about an hour and a half earlier because, number one, I'm overly punctual. And number two, I wanted to see what was going on with the other guys, my competition, who the other people were happened to be auditioning. And I think there were 2 other cats who were on the list who were before me. I had caught one guy who I believe played with the band Cracker. And we were at Ultrasound Studios, which is right by the Garden. I think it was in the 30s, between ninth and 10th. And I put my ear up to the door and I could hear what was going on. Now, I don't think things were going too well because the bass player, they kept stopping him and making some suggestions. And, I'm thinking to myself, okay, so he's approaching this song that way. All right, don't do that. Okay, just taking notes mentally what to do. So another 20 minutes goes by and this guy walks out, not too happy, did not look too happy, and just kind of just strolls off into the ethers. So I walk in, and wouldn't you know that Joseph, who's the Ilium Piper in the band, has a good friend who I happen to know. He just automatically, I get in there. He goes, I heard you're from New Milford. I said, yeah. He goes, do you know so-and-so? And I said, oh my gosh, yeah, I think I met him at a party years ago. So anyway, we had this connection, and it was meant to be. I walk in there, I plug in, we start playing, and there was just this, it was synchronistic. It was just, it was meant to be, and the energy was off the charts. It's almost as though I had played with these guys from the start. That's really how I felt. And I knew they were vibing it. And we started to do some improvisation, and which I knew they weren't doing that with the other guy because the other guy was only there for about 25 minutes. Here I am, it's about 30 minutes in, and we just started improvising. They threw me some stuff that I had not heard of before. I must have done well because an hour later, here we are. We finish up. Everybody's smiling. Hammy says to me, Joe, I'll give you a call tomorrow. Let me talk to the guys. So I get a call, and they want to put me on a retainer. And they asked me if I would be interested to go out on the road with them for a month just to feel it out and see if it's a good fit with the rest of the band. Because for the audition, it was just Larry, Joseph, and Hammy. So Jeff and Freddie were not there, who play saxophone and trombone. So the guys wanted to see if it was a good fit with the horn section too. So we went out there. I guess this was, boy, oh boy, October, November of 2006. And yeah, about 5 weeks after, no, I'm sorry. It was about late November into January 1st, because I did a New Year's Eve gig with them into the new year. And they asked me after that show to become a member. And man, the rest is history. I just cannot tell you how important that was to get into the band and to be able to have that experience. Because here I am, I'm performing with these singer-songwriters who are very talented, but we're playing to empty rooms. So I go from performing with 10 people, 15 people to 10,000 people within a couple months. So, I mean, I was ready. It was a situation where I was not prepared or nervous. I really wasn't nervous, but it was just a shock to the system of how much power the band had and the amount of bodies that the band performed in front of. I just wasn't used to that many people being in the audience, but I loved it. I really loved it. I felt that my time in the band which was just under 10 years, it was a gift. It was an absolute gift. These guys were my brothers. We still talk. I had lunch with Hammy not too long ago. I talked to Larry on the phone quite a bit. And the other guys, once in a while we'll email each other, but there's this camaraderie. It's hard to explain, but I felt like I was in the band from day one. I never felt like I was bass player number 4 or whatever I was, number 3. It felt like I was there from the drop of a hat when they started in 1989.
After Black 47 retired in 2016, Burcaw started his own musical school, Bearclaw's Academy of Music, and settled down to start a family. Of course, he's always playing music. So how did the Bearclaw and Balance Brigade project with Corey Glover come to be?
I am neighbors with Doug Wimbish, who's the bass player for Living Color. He lives up the street from me. And I remember distinctly, I think I was reading Bass Player magazine at Barnes and Noble, and he was on the front cover. And I was thinking to myself, oh, wow, Doug, that's great. I'm really, really happy that he got on the front cover. because I'm a fan. I love his playing. And at the bottom of the article, there was contact information if anybody would be interested in lessons. And I was at the point where I kind of needed a refresh. I don't know. I hit a point where there's a lot of stagnation in my playing, and I just needed someone like him who's a wall of sound, and he loves to use different sound electronics and all these effects, and he's amazing. The stuff he can do with boxes. We call them stomp boxes. And anyway, I got in touch with him and started taking some lessons, and we had a great rapport from day one. He knew about Black 47. And I remember one time he turned around, we're in the studio, and he looked at me and said, "Hey, I produce and write. You want to do some writing?" I said, "Yeah." So we started writing together, and we were writing these instrumental pieces that were very dance oriented, but the main focus was the bass guitar, where we would trade licks. And it was very interesting, very Euro sounding. And we got to a point where we felt like we needed to get a vocalist involved. And immediately we both said, "How about Corey?" So Doug called up Corey. He agreed. He came up one Saturday, I believe it was one weekend, and introduced me to him. And yeah, there was a really good rapport between us. And that's really what happened. We just became friends instantaneously on that session. And when COVID happened, here we are, everybody's stuck at home and with not a lot to do, but just worry about the state of the world. So I figured to take it upon myself to call up some friends, and I called up Corey and a mutual friend of ours, Jamie, to see if they'd be interested in doing some writing together. So they were. Jamie McDonald, by the way, is our mutual friend. And for 2 years, we were just trading ideas back and forth. Lyrically, I had some music stuff, Jamie had some music stuff, and we just were compiling it virtually. And that's the thing. We never recorded. There was only one session where we recorded, where it was the three of us in the same room, and that was the vocals for the song Zigzag. Everything else was done at our homes. Everybody has a DAW system. I have Logic, and Corey had GarageBand, and Jamie had Pro Tools. So we were just sending files to each other and swapping back and forth. And that's rare. That's how I met Corey, and to this day we have a great relationship and are still friends. And we have this EP, Four on the Floor, that we're going to be releasing in December. And we've just been very excited to get this thing out, because we've been sitting on it for about 6 months now. And yeah, it's very exciting. It's for me now, again, Living Color, one of my favorite bands. As a teenager, I used to watch MTV, used to see them when Cult of Personality came on, and that was getting a lot of traction, a lot of rotation, and I was mesmerized and floored by the musicianship, uh, by the way they were able to break into an all-white idiom when you think about it, because MTV at that point were playing mostly white bands. If you want to see a band like Fishbone, you'd have to stay up till 2 a.m. to see them. So they went mainstream, and every member of that band has so much talent and requires you to listen. I mean, you think of Corey's vocals. My gosh. I mean, from his church background, I mean, that voice, his voice sounds better now than it did in 1988. I can vouch for that because I've stood, 3 inches away from the guy recording. Vernon, I mean, this Shredmeister. I mean, look at that. Amazing player. Muzz Skilling's the former bass player, and Doug when he got into the band. Virtuosos, Will Calhoun. I mean, you combine all these people together, and it's just a recipe for. It's just bombastic. That's all I can say. Completely bombastic. So that, for me, being able to write with somebody who's my hero, it's one of those pinch the skin type of moments. but it's not, but again, we're peers. So I don't look at it as, oh my gosh, it's Corey Glover. Nope, I don't. It's just Corey. That's all it is. He respects me enough for me to share my ideas with him, and I feel the same about him. You know, we're working towards the same goal. So if we have, you know, I don't have any reservation telling him that his pitch is a little off on something. Can we redo that? You know, he's very open-minded. And if he doesn't like a lyrical idea, he'll say, let's try this. So I appreciate that. I really do.
Throughout our conversation, I'm conscious of how humble but confident Joe seems. I'm curious if he was ever intimidated by some of the artists he's worked with.
There's absolutely no intimidation whatsoever. I don't know where that comes from. I think it's just a matter of looking at the person as a musician and as an equal, and not putting them on that pedestal that I did when I was younger. And I think it proves to me too that, or at least, yeah, I guess it does. It proves to me that anything's possible, that there's no reason why you can't work with somebody that you admired as a kid. Things happen. And I think it's, as I said in my prologue, I think it's a matter of putting that energy out there and creating the situations to manifest. I really do believe that, because when I did meet Corey, I said in the back of my head, when I first met him at Doug's studio, I said, I am going to win him over. He is going to become my friend and we're going to work together. I did say that. So, again, it has nothing to do with me being cocky or overly confident. It's just a matter of wanting this to happen. Life is too short and you have to take risks. And I'm at the point now where I'm going to call up people that going forward with this project, Bearclaw and the Balance Brigade, it's created around the voice of Corey, but we're going to have different musicians come and go throughout the process as we continue to move forward. And I don't know, maybe I'll call up Stuart Copeland, because I love his plan. I might say what Stuart's doing, see if you want to play on a track. You have to take these steps in order to, to get some sort of reaction. And I'm not scared to do that. I don't, New York City has hardened me so much that I can take rejection and it doesn't bother me. And I can just move forward to the next, because I've had people that I've approached to do things and they've said no, and that's fine. It's not the type of thing where I'm going to lose sleep, where some people will. I saw a lot of people in New York City that went to auditions and they left that audition just because they didn't get the gig. They moved out of the city, that they could not take that rejection. But for me, it's like, nah, you just keep moving forward.
Bearclaw and the Balance Brigade's EP, 4 on the Floor, is available everywhere now. Joe kindly provided their first single, Zigzag, for you to hear a bit of now.
From me what's rightfully mine. Oh, so cynical, can't think of a way for me to exist, so you pull me in the fray. What's the matter? Can't you deal? Because we're free at last. You'll always fear the future, 'cause you can't reconcile. Conversation
And that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much to Joe for being on the show and for sharing your story. And a quick reminder that you can buy my book on 80s musicians and where they are today, 80s Redux, and its sequel, Live Through That, on 90s artists, wherever you buy your books. And if you like this show, please leave a review where you're listening. It always helps others find us. And of course, subscribe so you'll know when the latest episode comes out. You can also follow me on Threads at Mike Hipple, all one word, and Facebook at Mike Hipple Photo, also all one word. Thanks for listening.